Welcome to the Concrete Alberta Plant Auditors Qualification and Producers Orientation Program. The following PowerPoints will take you through the ready-mix concrete plant certification process, outlining your role in the process and the elements that should be examined throughout the audit process. You'll be required to complete a short examination of the key takeaways that you should acquire from completing this process in order to qualify to administer, in the case of the auditor, or to receive, in the case of the producer, plant certification from the Alberta Ready Mix Concrete Association, also known as Concrete Alberta. The term of your qualification will span the period until the next substantial update to the audit checklist, or 5 years, whichever comes first. The purpose of this process is to ensure clarity of each member's role in the process and therefore to minimize the number of deficiencies that would prevent ARMCA from issuing and sustaining a plant's certification throughout its 3-year term. The program's agenda will walk you through the key elements of the plant audit checklist, citing some of the specifics that the auditor should be looking for, as well as what the producers should have available for viewing by the auditor in support of plant certification. There are numerous instances throughout this process that require checking for compliance with CSA. It is therefore important that a copy of the most recent edition of CSA A23.1, A23.2 be available for consultation during the audit process. The program will also cover the annual submission criteria by the producer for the maintenance of the plant's certification throughout its 3-year term. The primary purpose of plant certification is to ensure that the concrete production facility, when operated properly by trained personnel, is physically configured and calibrated to produce quality concrete from CSA compliant materials. The following are the general requirements of the producer to acquire certification of their concrete production facility. The producer must be a current member in good standing and must operate their business in accordance with the ARMCA Concrete Alberta Code of Conduct. The producer must maintain the facilities in compliance with the audit checklist requirements at all times. The producer's representative must have successfully completed this plant auditor's qualification producer's orientation course within the last 5 years. The plant must be operating in order for the audit and certification to take place. The plant auditor for this certification must either be an independent third-party registered professional engineer or their designated accredited technical professional, such as a PTEC. However, the final audit submission must be reviewed, signed, and stamped by the PTEC's supervising professional engineer. In any event, both individuals must have completed this auditor qualification process within the last 5 years. The auditor must also provide proof of a registered business license and errors and omissions coverage. Finally, the auditor must be a current member in good standing of a PEGA or ASSET. The plant auditor and/or their designate cannot be an employee or an affiliate of the concrete producers company, nor can they be an employee of any of the producer's materials or equipment suppliers companies. So in summary, the people involved in the audit process are the auditing engineer and possibly a PTEC designate, the certifying engineer, who may be one of the same individuals just mentioned, and at least one member of the concrete facility staff, usually the facility's operations manager. The certifying engineer will be responsible to certify that the plant has been inspected either by them or their designate and meets all plant certification requirements, and that any deficiencies cited during the audit process have been corrected by the producer within 4 weeks of the initial inspection, or the entire audit process will need to be repeated at the producer's expense. The period designated to allow for correction and deficiencies may be extended provided that the extension deadline is defined and is agreed to by the producer, the auditor, and ARMCA. The concrete producer's designate, usually the facility's operation manager, will be required to sign the owner's conformance agreement as well as the certificate issued by ARMCA, committing to maintaining the plant in the same condition it was certified throughout the term of certification, and to provide annual submissions of documentation to support the continuity of that status. The ARMCA audit checklist contains a checklist of all of the requirements for the certification of the facility and the plant's delivery equipment, and includes a signed scale check agreement, a summary of fleet condition report, and the engineer's and plant owner's agreement of conformance. Each item on the checklist must be checked as either pass, fail, or not applicable. Once the checklist is completed, the bottom right corner of every page must be initialed by the auditor and the bottom left corner by the reviewing certifying engineer. The certifying engineer must complete their review of the audit checklist and return it to the plant owner or operations manager for signing. Upon correction of any deficiencies cited by the auditor, the plant owner must sign the document and return it to the certifying engineer for signing. The document cannot be signed until all applicable items are examined and any deficiencies are noted and corrected. ARMCA will issue a certificate of ready-mix concrete production facilities when a completed, signed, and sealed checklist from an approved auditor is received, the owner agrees in writing to certify the scales of the production facility at the frequency outlined in the audit, and finally, the owner agrees in writing to maintain the facilities in compliance with all other plant certification audit requirements. The following document submission procedure must be followed. The certifying engineer submits the completed original of the plant certification audit checklist to the facility's owner or manager for signing. The facility owner or operations manager reviews the audit, and if no deficiencies have been cited, signs the document and returns it to the certifying engineer, who in turn signs and seals the document and submits the original plant certification audit checklist to ARMCA. ARMCA reviews the signed plant certification audit checklist along with all required support documents for completeness and compliance. ARMCA will inform the certifying engineer of the findings of their review, and upon final acceptance of the submission, ARMCA issues and mails the Certificate of Ready-Mix Concrete Production to the owner, valid for 1 year. The owner or owner's representative must sign the certificate and display it in their facility and send a scan of the signed certificate back to ARMCA via email. Concrete Alberta updates the certification status of the plant on their website. ARMCA will update the plant certification status on an annual basis throughout the 3-year term and will issue a new certificate upon receipt of complete and accurate submission of continued compliance. The audit checklist contains a list of annual documentation submission requirements to maintain certification compliance. Details about the certification process are all available on the Concrete Alberta website under the Resources tab. As mentioned previously, plant certification renewal is granted on an annual basis throughout the 3-year term upon receipt of annual documentation submission demonstrating continued compliance with certification requirements. All past and present certification documentation should be available for inspection at any given time. Certification will become invalid upon ownership change of the plant or facility, upon movement or major modification of the facility, or upon failure to submit documentation at required intervals under this certification. The certificate may be revoked at the sole discretion of ARMCA. The certificate will remain valid for an active member in good standing if they submit the following information as per the audit requirements. First of all, completed scale check reports and admixture dispenser calibration reports every 6 months. Note that if a facility only operates seasonally, i.e. 6 consecutive months or less, then the scales and admixture dispensers only need to be checked at the beginning of each season before production commences or whenever there's a question of accuracy. The corresponding scale check and admixture dispenser calibration report from the scale calibrating firm and admixture supplier are also required to be submitted to ARMCA. Producers may conduct their own admixture dispenser checks providing they have proof of receipt of training from the admixture supplier on file. Secondly, producers must submit annual concrete aggregate test reports from certified test facilities as per CSA. Third, producers should submit an annual CSA compliance certification letter from their cementing material suppliers covering all cements and supplementary cementing materials used in production. And finally, annual summary of fleet condition reports. Note that if the fleet inspection is conducted by the auditor at the time of the plant inspection, the producer must either contract the auditor to return annually to conduct the same fleet condition inspection or begin their own annual fleet condition inspection of each of their delivery vehicles and submit the summary report along with the rest of their annual submission documentation.